Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Winning Cases with eDiscovery and Artificial Intelligence. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Florida Bar's Standing Committee on Technology and Legal Fuel, the Practice Resource Center of the Florida Bar. This is a continuation of our series of webinars we've been hosting, which are leading up to our annual all-day technology seminar, which is scheduled to take place in conjunction with the annual Florida Bar Convention on June 9th. The details of the all-day technology seminar can be found on our website, legalfuel.com, under our event calendar. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. We will be recording this webinar and we'll share the link after the event. The recording and any supporting resources will be posted to our website, legalfuel.com. Any questions you may have during today's presentation can be asked through the Q&A feature, which you'll find down at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control panel. Our presenter will do his best to answer any questions you have. However, due to time constraints, they may not be able to address them all. Today's presentation has been approved by the Florida Bar for 1 hour of General CLE credit, including 1 hour of ethics and technology. The course number for today is 4993. Again, that course number is 4993. And I'd now like to hand it off to our presenter, Mr. Carlos Baradat.
All right. There we go. Can you see the screen right there?
Yes.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining us, and thanks, Jonathan, for having me here at another Legal Fuel event. My name is Carlos Baradat, and just to give you a quick background on me, I'm an attorney out of Naples, Florida, but I spend most of my time as a owner of the Baradat Group, which is an IT consulting company for law firms, right? So I spend most of my time assisting attorneys and law firms with anything having to do with technology, whether it's e-discovery or digital forensics. So today we're going to be touching on a subject that I care about very deeply. I've been working on it for a long time. And as a professor at the university, I've been teaching it for about 7 or 8 years now. So without any further ado, let's one more thing. I encourage all of you to take my email down because if there's ever any questions regarding some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm always willing to help any one of my colleagues, especially when it comes to these type of topics. Okay. So the subject today is winning cases with e-discovery and artificial intelligence, right? Today, we're going to divide the CLE into 2 parts. We're going to talk about e-discovery, and then we'll get a little bit into the artificial intelligence, maybe some machine learning. But don't worry, we're not going to get too technical. So I don't want you to start glazing over already. It's going to be an interesting conversation. From the e-discovery point of view, we're going to be talking about the whole process, right? So in other words, for those of you that are already familiar with e-discovery, hopefully you'll leave today's presentation with a better understanding of some of the nuances of the process, right? Such as early case assessment or data collection, and we'll even touch on proportionality. Now, if you're new to e-discovery and artificial intelligence, my hope is that this presentation in many ways ignites a hunger in you to want to learn more about these topics so that you can start incorporating them into your own practice, as I feel like you'll find them very beneficial. So again, we'll talk about some early case assessment. We'll talk about data collection process. Then we'll touch on the analysis and review of ESI. And then we'll finish with the cost and proportionality aspects. But before we get started, I would be remiss if I don't at least touch very quickly on some ethical considerations that I think are always important anytime that we talk about technology, right? So in other words, the duty of competence is one thing that should always be in the back of our minds, right? Duty of confidentiality is something that we always need to be addressing, particularly when we have e-discovery issues that are going to be dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of files, right? And we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But one ethical consideration that I think it's important, that I think oftentimes gets overlooked, is the duty to supervise non-lawyers, okay? Now, particularly today, right, when we are having so many people work remotely and out of the office, this duty couldn't be more prevalent, right? At the end of the day, I always say that the buck stops with us. So it's always our license on the line. So it's important that we always keep an eye on that duty to supervise non-lawyers. And again, that doesn't just mean paralegals or legal staff. Keep in mind that that also includes vendors that you may be working with, particularly e-discovery or digital forensics and that type of thing. And then finally, the inadvertent disclosure of privileged materials. I always mention this because, in my opinion, it's really not a matter of if, but when you're going to send something inadvertent to the other side, particularly when you're working with digitally stored information, right? So that's really just the quick summary of those ethics rules that I think it's important that we always have in the back of our minds, particularly when we go into the topics that we're going to be discussing today. So, you know, the reality is that e-discovery and artificial intelligence are already very much part of our legal practice, right? E-discovery and AI platforms are really much more accessible and cost-effective than ever before. And so now even smaller firms, and including solo practitioners, have access to a lot of this technology, and not just the bigger firms with larger budgets as it once was the case. So let's start off by talking about e-discovery, right? We'll talk about the early case assessment and some of the pre-litigation steps that we need to do. But before we do that, I would like to ask all of you a quick question, which is just to kind of gauge the room, right? Because one of the most difficult things about these type of CLEs is not knowing the level of knowledge that everybody that's watching has on the subject that we're talking about, right? So how many of you have ever actually used EDiscovery software? If you could just take a quick moment to answer that, I would greatly appreciate it. And then Jonathan will share the results with everybody. So as those results come in, what is EDiscovery, right? So getting rid of all the technical jargon, right? To me, EDiscovery is simply the process of taking a large set of files stored in some type of digital format, right? And reducing that number of files to the smallest set possible, right? In a legally defensible manner before we actually begin the manual review. In other words, when we get a response to a request for production, or a client provides us with, say, 10, 15, or 100,000 emails and documents, we can no longer justify reviewing all those documents one at a time, right? Knowing that we have software out there that can do those data sets in just a few hours and help us get rid of many of those files. So again, using and learning about e-discovery is an incredible way to not only save you time, but save your client money. And we'll talk about those things in just a moment. And by the way, that was great. So about 75% of you have never actually used e-discovery software, and about 25% of you have. So hopefully there's still going to be a lot of information for both of you, for both sides here. So before we actually get into the e-discovery process, right, using the software and those platforms, there's a lot of work that we need to do beforehand, right? We need to ensure that we've done some pre-litigation work. There are some things that need to be addressed as early as possible in order to put your client in the best position possible to win the case, right? So, and remember, we're talking about winning cases with e-discovery, so that's going to be hovering over the presentation the whole time. So how can we do this? Well, we can do this by ensuring that we have a solid understanding of the potential data, or ESI, electronically stored information, that may be involved in the case, right? So it's just as important early on to understand, or to have an understanding of how much data the opposing side has as it is how much data your client has, okay? And the first step in doing that is a litigation hold, right? So I can't tell you how many times I'll get a call from an attorney and they'll say, Carlos, we have a case, we just got, there's potentially, hundreds of thousands of emails that we have to go through. And my question is always that, the first question that I always ask is, okay, great, have you sent out a litigation hold letter? And then the silence on the phone begins, right? The reality is that they haven't. So, remember, we got some guidance a few years ago in Legal Women Voters of Florida versus Detzner in terms of the trigger for beginning to preserve discovery, right, for ESI purposes. So reasonable anticipation of litigation is the standard, right? That's what we're supposed to do. But we're always afraid of that reasonableness, right? Somebody's interpretation of what reasonable is. So if we send out that litigation hold letter right away, we're kind of taking away that argument, right? We've literally put that person, that team on notice that at least as of now, you're supposed to have preserved that information. So for me, a client comes in today, we sign an agreement, and there should be a litigation or a preservation letter sent out the following day. So not only to opposing counsel, by the way, but also to our own client. You need to document the fact that you have advised your client that they now have a duty to preserve any and all evidence that may be related to the case at issue, right? So that litigation hold letter and that preservation letter is going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to put your client in a position to perhaps down the road, as it inevitably happens, because I get those calls all the time, when the discovery process begins 6, 7, or 8 months down the road, where you do a request for production and opposing side tells you that, well, my client accidentally dropped the phone in the pool and no longer works. They sold it, they upgraded. I've heard every story possible. Their computer got a virus and all information was deleted. They got hacked, ransomware. If you do that litigation hold early on, you are at least putting your client in a position to have an argument for spoliation, right? And the other side of that coin is that you may very well be protecting your client from spoliation arguments, right? Because there's a trend right across the country right now where attorneys malpractice claims that attorneys have not advised their clients to preserve the data that they needed down the road in their case. So before we get to the next step, now we're at the client intake process, right? The client has come in. We've decided that we can't help this person. An agreement has been signed. And as part of the onboarding process, there really ought to be an EDiscovery client intake form, in my opinion, as the one that you see here, okay? Now, this isn't all-encompassing, but it should serve as a starter to better understand the potential ESI that is going to be involved in the case. Now, this form that you're looking at can be modified to fit whatever type of case that you're working on, but the premise remains the same, right? Have a solid understanding of the type of ESI that your client has, right? That may be relevant to the case. Now, you're gonna want to know how many iPhones they have, or PCs, and mobile devices, iCloud accounts, social media accounts. And I know many of you are looking at this and saying, now, why would I want to know all of that? That seems like a lot of work. Well, with over 99% of all communications being done in some type of digital format, it's not hard to believe that most of the discovery that you're going to be working with is going to be in some type of digital format, right? It's going to be coming from an iPhone, or it's going to be coming from a computer, some kind of social media account. And because of that, it's important that you have an understanding of all of those potential places early on, because as you're going to find out pretty soon, ESI is volatile, right? It can change at any moment. And for instance, each company, for instance, service providers like Verizon and AT&T and all T-Mobile, they all have different policies. It's already incredibly difficult to get any information from them because of all the protections that they have. But even when we are able to get protections, I mean, some of the documents from them, they may no longer have it, because let's say T-Mobile only keeps their data for 2 weeks, AT&T maybe for only 45 days. If we knew that early on, we may be able to save some of that information. On the other hand, if we wait 6, 7, or 8 months down the road before we actually looked into those type of things, that information that we need may be gone already. Okay, and so whether it's a civil case or a criminal law, it's just as important, right? So again, to me, that a form like this, and by the way, I'm more than happy if you email me after the event. I'm more than happy to email you maybe a Word version of this form that you can basically maybe change or edit to fit your type of practice. Okay, so we've already got the client. They come in. We have their information in terms of what type of data, potential data they may have. So now the collection process begins, right? Now, to me, this is probably one of the most important parts of what we're going to be talking about today, because I always say that all the evidence in the world can't help you if you can't get it admitted into the courtroom, right? Like if you can't be admitted, it does you absolutely no good. And so in order to do that, let's talk briefly about collection methods, and let's make sure that we understand what ESI means. Now, for all you pros out there that know what electronically stored information is, don't worry, because we're going to expand on what we think about in terms of ESI, right? Most of us know that ESI is a Word document or spreadsheet, right? A PowerPoint or an email. That's all ESI. But let's take a look that expands on that, right? ESI, it's also much deeper than that, right? ESI is also information that is volatile, right? Digital information can change in an instant. I get hired a lot to go on the computers and try to retrieve data that was once deleted, right, or erased. Well, every time that you turn on a computer or turn it off, data inside of that computer changes, right? So basically, if you have information that's been deleted and that you're trying to recuperate, just by turning on a computer or turning it off could theoretically cause the computer to write on top of that old data, and then it's lost forever, okay? So the other part of ESI that we should also take note is that it can be in multiple places at once, right? So it's not difficult to think in today's world with the Internet of Things, right? That the same information could be on your phone, it could be on your laptop, it could be on the cloud, it could be on an iPad, it could be on your iWatch. And so the reason why I mentioned this is because I want you to start thinking of ESI, kind of think outside the box when it comes to ESI and when you're working on your case. So if you're working on a case where the client lost a phone that had all the information in it, well, maybe not all is lost just yet, because there's other places to look, right? There's the cloud, maybe there was a backup, maybe they had a computer at the house where they had plugged in their iPhone even a year ago, and that backup of the iPhone is still on that computer. There's still many places that we can look for that information, and I just want to make sure that that I would mention that to you. So now the next step, it's also important to understand that the data that we're talking about, right, digital information, can actually be manipulated. Don't think that just because you have a native file or an email that somebody with the knowledge of how this works can't change the dates on an email message, for instance, the header on an email. All that data can be manipulated if you know what you are doing. So we'll talk about metadata in just a moment, but the point that I'm really trying to make here is that we need to ensure that, particularly in cases where there's a lot of potential ESI or a case that hinges on a text message or an email, that you've sought at least the assistance of an expert on that field to ensure that the proper methods were used to identify those files, right? To ensure that the collection was sound. Because I can tell you that what I see a lot, and what I'm going to give you a quick, just a slight cautionary tale, is for these self-collections, right? I work with attorneys that tell me that there was a request for production, and what do they typically do? Well, they call up the client and they say, look, I need you to find me all the emails related to the case that at issue, right? So what does the client do? Well, they'll go into their Outlook or Gmail, their Yahoo, AOL, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is that they're using, they're gonna go in there and they're gonna do keyword searches. And my guess is that at least some of you out there that are watching this are thinking, yeah, we've done that, or they've done that. Well, the reason why I bring it up is because there's a good chance that whatever information they provide you, once they do those keyword searches and they export those emails back to you, there's a good chance that they may have missed important information and that you didn't produce. So again, we go back to that reasonable standard, right? Did we take reasonable steps to ensure that our client provided the accurate data? And so to expand on that, what happens is, if you do a keyword search, for instance, on Outlook, a couple of things are happening, right? First, Again, it works the same with any other type of email platform that you are using, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever. If you do a keyword search and you type in that word, depending on the setup of your system, it may only be searching the subject line, or it may only be searching the body of the email and not the subject line. Maybe you're lucky and it's searching both the subject line and the body of the email. But what it's not doing, it's not searching most of the time the attachments, okay? Because unless that attachment was OCR'd previously, there's a good chance that it's never going to see that attachment. So if the word that you're looking for, the keyword that you're looking for, is in an attachment that is in an email that was scanned, it may not find it. And furthermore, if the word that you are looking for, the keyword that you're looking for on an email was misspelled, there's a good chance that it's not going to find that either, because it's not really created to do that. Okay, so again, the cautionary tale is if you're asking the client to do self-collections, you just got to be careful. You need to be able to, what we call validate the process. In other words, that what they are giving to you to give to the opposing side is accurate. Okay. So now that we have an understanding of the type of data that we're looking for, where can we find it? And again, although I know that most of you know that ESI can be in a lot of places, I want you to really start thinking about thinking outside the box, because I have been able to find data, evidence that has helped many cases in places that you would have never thought of, or that I would have never thought of. So some of the main ones right now, of course, are the emails, right? That's where you find electronically stored information, in text messages. But again, let's go beyond that. Not just the iMessage. Remember now that there are a bunch of apps out there, WhatsApp, there's, you could be a messenger, a Facebook Messenger, there's Pinterest and Instagram. There's all kinds of apps that could potentially have communications that you want to know about. There's been cases where you have to look inside of like an Xbox or a PlayStation, because people know that you can communicate through those devices. And that's a place where nobody really looks at, right? Who would think to go into an Xbox or a PlayStation to try to get conversations that could be helpful to your case? Of course, we know about Word documents and spreadsheets. Social media is a big one. And audio. I wanted to briefly talk about audio because we now have software, right, that can take audio. Let's say you have 100 hours worth of audio and you're looking for a particular phrase. Well, we now have software that it's able to analyze that entire audio set, okay? And after it's processed, we can actually just do keyword searches for the words that you are looking for. So that's technology that is out there. And I wanted to mention just a couple others here really quick. And by the way, I apologize because, of course, as luck would have it, there's people working outside, wouldn't you know it? And so the next one on the list here is the routers, right? Again, what I'm trying to get you to think of is electronically stored information outside the box. Where could this be? Where can we find that information? Well, Wi-Fi's and routers contain an incredible amount of information. So there's been cases, right, where a person, let's say, was not supposed to be at a particular location. They get deposed, they get stopped, and that person says, I've never been to that house. I don't even recognize that address. I can assure you that I've never been there before. Well, if you're fortunate enough to be able to get access to that person's phone via subpoena or whatever else, there's a good chance that we're going to be able to go into that phone and find, because of the way that cell phones work, that they're constantly searching for the best Wi-Fi connection and the most robust connection, the one that's nearest to them. There's a good chance that that phone may actually have the name of the Wi-Fi of that person's house if that person was indeed at that location at one point. Again, information in iWatches and car black boxes are an incredible tool to get, an incredible place to get information. A car black box can essentially tell you, whether a car was, what it was doing at the time of impact. Was it turning left? Was their right blinker on? Was the music on? Was there a phone connected to it? And if so, sometimes whether they were texting, which way was the car faced at the time of impact? So again, keep an open mind and understand that now there's literally computer chips in light bulbs, in refrigerators, in all kinds of places that could actually, and I've seen it, assist in places to be able to prove that a light was turned on at a particular time. And so we know that that person was indeed home. So now that we know where all of this information can be located, and again, remember that what we're doing is we're building up the case to the EDiscovery software, right? We need to be able to have data to be able to put into the software. So if we don't have all of this information collected properly and understand it, we can't even get to the EDiscovery software process, right? So let's briefly talk about metadata, because now that we have the actual files in our hands, right, we want to make sure that we understand the wealth of information that can be found deep within those files, right? In many ways, metadata is what drives the EDiscovery process. Now, what you're looking at right now is there's a Word document on the left that if it's just sitting on your computer, that's what you look at, right? You can read it, you can see the comments. It's just a file. But if you have the original version of that file, in other words, not a PDF, but the original Word document, there's a lot more information to that file than the eye can see. And you can see just some of it on the right side, right? Those are just properties of that file that can tell you the name of the file, whether the file was tagged in any way, whether the person wrote comments on that file, who was the author of that file, who was the person that saved it last, what program was used to open it, when was it created, when was it revised, and if you can see on your computer screen, even the amount of time that the person spent editing that file, that type of information can be found. And this is just a small portion of the total amount of information that we can find on a file. So now, why is that important? Why do I need to know all of these things? Well, that's what EDiscovery does, right? It's going to help make your life a lot easier and work on these cases in a way, for those of you that have never used EDiscovery, it will literally change the way that you practice law, in my opinion. Because without the metadata, if you're not using metadata, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, what you're working with is basically just PDF files, right? And you are very limited as to what you can do with them. So now, let's keep moving. We've collected the evidence. We know where it's located. We know what metadata is. And so now we get to the good stuff, right? Now we get to actually analyze this information and use these tools that everybody talks about at every CLE event, right? Every EDiscovery CLE that you've gone to. So who's actually using all of this software, and how can we use it? Well, I'm going to attempt to show you how this really works, okay? And keep in mind that it's very difficult to do it with just a couple of pictures, but we'll do our best, right? So most of the time, and I mean most of the time, we're going to want native forms of a file when we do a request for production, okay? Now, a native file is essentially a file that is in the same format in which the platform that was used to create it. And all that means is that a Word document that you typed up, the native file for a Word document is a Word document, okay? Not the PDF that it was converted to, right? If you take a Word document and convert it to a PDF, that PDF strips all of that important information that we want, all of that metadata goes away. So now you just have a PDF file, almost just like a picture, a photograph, right? An image. So we want to, so again, we want to try to as often as we can to get that native file. If you type the email on Outlook, well, the native file will be Outlook. Okay, so it'll have an EML at the end of it or a PST at the end of it. Okay, so if you look if you look at your screen, that's basically the same content, right? The one on the right is an email, but it was produced in PDF format on the left. Now, before we go on to the software, I'm going to do another cautionary, I guess, a be careful what you wish for type of thing, right? Because a native file is only as good as the software that you have to open it, okay? And what I'm trying to say here is that if you can't open a native file, then it's absolutely no good to you. So let me explain. There are cases that I've worked on where an attorney has called me and says, Carlos, you'd be proud of me. I made sure and requested all my production in native format. It took them 2 weeks to do it, but finally I have these hard drives full of hundreds of thousands of documents in their native form. And when I tell them, okay, now what is the native format of these files? And in this particular case, they said, well, it's proprietary software. They use their own version, their own software. They had somebody create a particular software for them. Well, now he's in big trouble because he may have the native form of that file, but he doesn't have the format, the tools or the software to open it, because only one person has that software, and it's declined for the opposing side, right? So be careful what you wish for. And that's why it's so important early on, as much as attorneys may not like to do this, to have discussions across the aisle early on about e-discovery. Hey, listen, what kind of files are we looking at here? Are we looking at just emails? Are we looking at spreadsheets? Or what type of software are you using? If you have those conversations early on, it can go a long way down the road when you actually get into the discovery process, because you won't get these type of surprises. Okay, but assuming that you are working with native files, this is the difference. If you don't have a native file and all you're working with are Word documents that the other and PDF that the other party brought to you, and you don't have eDiscovery software, my guess is that a lot of you are basically going into your folder on your computer and your subfolder where production 123 is on here, and then you're doing searches, right? Keyword searches. Okay, I'm looking for anything that has the word purple on it or contract, and then you're going to get the results that it finds. But you're going to run into the same issues that we talked about earlier with email, right? Because if you misspell the word, or if the word that you're looking for is misspelled in any one of those documents, it's just simply not going to find it. And if the PDF file that you're looking for isn't OCR'd, you're also not going to find it. The same with PDFs, right? If you're not using eDiscovery software, my only guess is that you're doing your discovery process and your review process via Adobe or something similar, right? And not that it can't be done, but if you are working with anything more than a couple of thousand documents, that's going to take a long time, right? Because first you have to look in each PDF file individually. You can combine them, of course, but I can tell you, I have incredibly powerful computers at my disposal, and even those take, depending on the size of the PDFs, it can take hours and hours to combine, thousands of pages of PDF documents. So again, you run into the same issues, right? If you're searching for a PDF or for a keyword with a PDF, if it was misspelled. So on the other hand, if we have native files, right? If somebody produced to us, 100,000 document, or in my case here, my example that I'm going to show you, I uploaded 10,000 files, almost 10,000 files into eDiscovery software, right? And these are native files, right? Because we want all that good metadata. We want all those dates and authors and everything that is associated with that file, so we can separate it all and be able to categorize it nice and neat. So I upload my information into eDiscovery Platform, one of the many, many that are out there. And after only a couple of hours worth of work and processing, this is what I get back. I get something that looks something like this. Now, if you look at your screen, don't worry about the uploader tag, but look at the document type that it's showing. It has automatically categorized every single one of my files into a separate category. It's telling me that out of all the files that I uploaded, there are nearly 8,600 emails, some 183 documents. In fact, there are 26 presentations and 57 spreadsheets. Now, how can that be helpful? Well, if you have a production of perhaps 100,000 documents, and all you're looking for is a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet, that's what you're looking for. That's all you're focused on today. Well, if you have eDiscovery software, you can find that in minutes, if not seconds, right? Now you just go to those 57 spreadsheets and you got what you wanted, right? Of course, we can separate everything via custodians, right? We can set and search only, because as the case builds, when we upload information, we say, okay, this is the information, emails from John Doe, from Jane Doe, from Andy, and then we can do global searches where we search for it all across the board, or we only search it on particular custodians. But there's plenty more information that we can get out of EDiscovery, right? So you have this huge case and you have 100,000 documents, but you don't want to waste time reading emails that aren't pertinent to your file, to the case. Well, if you look at your left there, the email from domains, it has separated literally every single available domain in all of the emails. So now, let's say I know for a fact none of the emails having to do with Amazon.com are pertinent to my case. Well, I can just click those off and not see them on my search results anymore. Let's say that none of the emails from Kaiso.com are relevant to my case either. I can just click those off, and you can see how easily you can start getting rid of a lot of information that is simply not relevant for you to have to go through. Working further, now we have document dates, right? Now let's say you have 100,000 documents, but really all you're interested in are all of the documents or emails that were from January 15th to February 12th. Well, we put in those dates in here, and do you remember that metadata that can be extracted from those files? The date, that's what it's using here to be able to do that, right? On the other hand, if you had PDF files and you have 10,000 PDFs, and I ask you, okay, I want you to please separate all of the emails that are between these two dates, that's going to be a long week or a couple of weeks for you, right? Let's go one step further. Now, we said that with this data set, we had about 10,000 documents, right? Well, the EDiscovery software has immediately found 2,800 duplicates, right? So now that's another set of documents that I don't even have to review, because it has used hash values of those documents to verify that they're actually the same document, okay? So I'll speed along here so that we don't run out of time, but you can see how incredibly helpful EDiscovery software can be, right? I hope that you do. So what does all this goodness cost? Well, the reality is that there are many, many different platforms out there at different price ranges. But what I can tell you is that over the last 10 years, even last couple of years, the cost of EDiscovery has really gone down quite a bit. And something that, in my opinion, was really only able to be used by bigger firms or clients with much bigger budgets, that's really no longer the case. Now you have so many vendors out there that are competing for your business that not only are they competitive, but they're affordable. Better yet, they're predictable, right? And they're customizable to what your needs are. Okay, so keep that in mind. And again, I'm more than happy to try to guide you in the right direction for those of you that have questions on those type of things, because this is literally what I do and I love to do. And then finally, on this end, proportionality. Florida rules expressly provide that ESI is discoverable, but they also require proportionality of expense. So the reason why I put this up here is because we need to use every tool available to us, right? And proportionality is one of those. You need to, if you're working on a case where the amount in controversy, let's say it's $15,000, but it's going to cost your client $20,000 or $10,000 to go through their servers to find what they're looking for and all that EDiscovery, the burden and the expense may very well outweigh the likely benefit. And that's something that really you need to bring to the court's attention. And so again, know that proportionality is a tool. Every side has a right to the discovery, but only really if the burden doesn't outweigh its likely benefit, right? So just keep that in mind. And so now let's move on for a few moments on artificial intelligence, okay? Now, artificial intelligence is a very broad topic, but before we get to talking about it, I'm gonna ask Jonathan to please poll you guys and ask you how many of you have ever used artificial intelligence? And I'm hoping that all of you can see those results. And so we'll talk, as those get up, we'll talk about those in just a moment. But first, let's find out really what is artificial intelligence. Well, I thought that I would spend the next 30 minutes talking about how an algorithm, I'm just kidding, we're not going to do that. Oh, interesting. Okay, so about 76% of you don't think that you've ever used any type of artificial intelligence. Well, let me tell you, artificial intelligence in the simplest terms really is the way that we leverage what computer language or what computers can do to mimic problem solving and decision making capabilities of humans. So in other words, we are used to working with computers in ways that we tell a computer what to do, right? For years, that's what we've been taught. We give the computer instructions. In other words, bring up this file for me, search for it, those type of things. That's telling the computer what to do. Those are instructions. Artificial intelligence goes beyond that, right? It teaches the computer to do things like we would, responses, to have responses that would mimic what we would respond to in that particular situation. And so to answer your question, the question that I pulled, it was more of a, the reality is that it was a trick question, right? Because the reality is all of us use artificial intelligence in some way, shape, or form on a daily basis. And I think that in order to get into the mindset of how artificial intelligence really works in the concept of legal practice, I thought I would just kind of mention a few so you can get an understanding of really what's going on behind the scenes in a lot of these things. So, for instance, all of us use artificial intelligence every time we use our GPS on our phones or Google Maps or iPhone or Waze. When you put an address, Naples to Orlando, and it gives you 3 different routes to take, that's artificial intelligence. It's taking real-time data and coming up with a solution to your problem, to our problem, that can get you to your location in the quickest amount of time, or in some instances, it wants to save you the tolls, right? So it's taking a lot of data into consideration to give you the best option. Now, if you tried that same directions 2 or 3 hours later, the answers might be different because data has changed, okay? Planes, if you fly in a commercial plane, the reality is, pilots only fly the planes for about 6 to 7 minutes of an actual flight. They're taking off and landing. The rest of the time, it's really using some sort of artificial intelligence or machine language to get you to your destination, because it's taking into consideration all of these data sets that are constantly being put into it. Spam on your email is artificial intelligence. How does it know to go to your spam folder? What if that email doesn't have any of the bad words that are easy to tell that it's spam? Well, it uses data sets from pretty much every user out there. If you have Gmail, for instance, it's taking information from every single Gmail user, and it's taken into account that, gosh, thousands and thousands of people have seen this email, and all of those have put it into spam. So it's taking that information and making an informed decision as to why that particular item should be spam. But if you use mobile deposits, what the technology that recognizes your signature, that's artificial intelligence. And the one that most people will probably recognize is Netflix, right? Spotify, any one of those. You ever wonder? I mean, they do a pretty good job at telling you what type of music you might like. We recommend that you listen to these bands or these songs, or when you're watching Netflix or something like that, we recommend these movies to you. Well, think of it this way. Every time you watch Netflix, you are feeding a data set to that to the artificial intelligence, to that using machine language. You just didn't know it, because the first time that you use Netflix and you watch the comedy, that's all it knows about you, right? But then the second and third time, you're watching movies by a particular actor, or during a particular time of the year, or during a particular time of day. All that is information that you're teaching Netflix. By the time a year or 2 has gone by, Netflix has a really good understanding of what you like because of the movies. Sometimes you click on a trailer and you only watch it for 3 seconds before you realize you're not going to like this movie. It takes all that into consideration. And that's the kind of use that we use with artificial intelligence in law practice. that same concept, right? And face recognition is one of the, it's a really important one right now because, if you're working on a case that has, tens of thousands, and I've worked with those, right? So 100,000 photographs, you may be only, and let's say you're doing a time constraint and you're only looking for photos that may have a particular person. Well, now we have the tools to be able to do that. Let's say you're only looking for ones with a person that has a tattoo, or you're looking for only for ones that have a hammer on that photograph, or a car, or a license plate. Well, now we have tools available that can help us go through that in only a couple of hours rather than days or weeks. And many of you are probably familiar with fuzzy searches and those type of things. That's what you use with EDiscovery software to try to find words that were misspelled, right? So when you use EDiscovery software, like the one that I showed you earlier, even if you misspell Carlos and you use a Z, or you flip the last two letters, EDiscovery is software, by the use of artificial intelligence, is going to help you find that type of information. It's going to tell you, some of the really good software will say, let's say you're looking for the word Carlos. It's going to say, we found 200 documents with a 100% hit, but there's all these documents that we think might be what you were looking for, but we're not for sure. So we're only going to give it a 92% accuracy. So that's the type of thing that you can find. You can actually teach the software to differentiate between meanings of a word, like a diamond as an actual diamond, or a baseball diamond, right? Because you don't want to waste time with things that aren't relevant to you. And so a couple other things that I think that you'll find interesting that artificial intelligence is doing for our profession is that it's using algorithms to teach software to learn from data sets to perform certain tasks. So in contract review, for instance, you can use it. There's tools already out there that can identify, once you upload it to the system, the contract type, whether it's a sales contract or a lease agreement. And it can also extract all kinds of information like parties, dates, governing law, and plenty more. Okay, legal research. Obviously we don't really endorse any particular one, but I just thought I would list some of the ones that are already out there, because there's nothing worse than going into court with what you believe is the best authority in a matter that's being disputed, right? Only to find out that opposing counsel has a better one, or one that you didn't find, right? Well, there are companies out there right now that are working on technology that will help the ability to flag cases. So although not explicitly overruled or reversed, that are likely bad law on account of relying on other overturned cases, right? And other vendors already have products out there that allow you to upload a legal document like opposing counsel's brief, and it will actually suggest additional authorities that might be relevant to your search. So you can use those type of things almost as a backup to what you are already doing in terms of your legal research. Okay. Document automation, I'll go through this quickly, but this is what people call TAR, or predictive coding, TAR 1.0, 2.0. What I do know is that all of us can probably agree that law practice involves a lot of paperwork. Even a simple case can involve a lot of documents, right, that we have to review. Sometimes we're in a time constraint. So within the realm of EDiscovery, this predictive coding automates the document review process. It essentially gives computers the ability to learn from human input and make an educated guess as to how documents should be classified. So once the process has gone through, it can actually tell you whether these documents are privileged. It could actually tell you these are non-responsive, these are responsive. And there are already studies out there that are very good in terms of accuracy, because the 10-second version or the 30-second version is you take a large data sets. Let's say you have a million documents or 100,000 documents to go through. You upload it into the EDiscovery software that has this ability to do predictive coding, and then you go through 100 of those documents randomly selected by the software, and you tag it as responsive, non-responsive, privileged, confidential. Then you upload it to the software, and you let the software try to take what you just taught it and do their own guess, right? So then it'll kick back on about 100 documents, whatever you choose, and then you go through and see how well the computer did. you corrected it here, you corrected it here, they got it right here, they got it wrong here. Well, you do that a few times, and you will notice is that the accuracy rate of the computer keeps going up and up and up until you get to about a point in which is about, whatever you and opposing counsel and the court have agreed to. So if you've agreed to say that as soon as we get it to 95% or higher in terms of accuracy, we're not going to go through these million documents. We're going to put it in tar and let the computer, send out, produce the results. Okay, prediction technology, and we're coming to a close here, but so I think we'll have time for a couple of questions. But prediction technology is pretty interesting, right? Because one of the questions that as attorneys, as we get is, am I going to win the case? Should I settle? Well, there are already models out there that are helping predict outcomes of pending cases, right? So artificial intelligence is taking similar cases with similar fact patterns and providing statistical analysis to predict the litigation outcomes, right? So the idea behind these tools is really to allow to attorneys to eventually be able to confidently tell a client how to move forward with litigation, right? But the jury's still out on many of these companies and what they can do or how accurate they're going to be. But nevertheless, it's very interesting to see where we're headed, because it's really the point of this is going to be to be able to tell that in a particular district, a particular judge with a pattern like this one, 90% of the time, this judge has had this opinion, or a case has gone this way. That's really the future of where these companies think it's going. And again, there are companies out there right now providing this service. I think, so I'll start closing with this. One thing to remember is that artificial intelligence is not here to take any jobs away, right? At least not yet. What we need to do is think of artificial intelligence or machine learning as just another tool on our belt to more efficiently and diligently represent our clients. There are some tasks that a machine simply can't do at this point. They can't apply common sense to a particular set of circumstances. I'm not aware of any machine that can perform abstract thinking on its own. But what they can do is very, very fast analysis of data. And that is where we need to take advantage of, right? So think about that. So we need to use it as tools to help us, not that they're going to come in and take any of the jobs away. So I'm just going to close by saying five takeaways from today's, presentation is, one, always have an understanding of the ethical implications when we're talking about technology. I don't think anybody has ever asked an attorney to become an IT professional. I think what we need to do is be able to at least understand the language, right? To at least know what we're talking about, or better yet, know when to ask for help, right? When to call an EDiscovery specialist or digital forensics to collect the tools. Know when to ask for help, I think, is really key. Preserving the data, I just can't emphasize how important it is to send out that litigation hold letter early on, because I can tell you from working with my clients, with attorneys on a daily basis, this is one step that it's missed quite a bit, and I still don't really understand why, because it should go out right away. If you have a client that got in an accident and the potential cameras are everywhere, right? A litigation hold letter should be going to third parties that may potentially be in that area that could have caught a glimpse of the particular incident and things like that. Data location, the best thing that I could word it is think outside the box, right? Always think about where else could this data be located. And if it connects to your phone, there's a chance that it has data on it. I'll tell you really quick. I once looked at the forensics. I was doing forensic work on a phone, and I actually found by accident conversations that the phone had recorded because they had Alexa at the home, or one of those Siris or Echoes in the home. So when you tell Siri turn on the TV or turn on the lights, well, it's not a perfect system, right? And so I actually found data on that phone from conversations that were never really meant to even be heard by one of these devices, the phone just grabbed it and stored it. Collection of data, again, this goes to that. Just make sure that you're doing it in a forensically sound manner. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have all of this data and then go into court. And let's say the other side hired somebody like me, and then I begin to question how you got to obtain that data that is in front of you. You know, is that a real text message? You know, and can you, or is that just a, because you have you only have an image of that phone or a screenshot, you know, how do I know that you didn't create that text message like I can do in less than 30 seconds, you know, with just software that I have on my computer, you know? So again, collect the data and get the help that you need when you need it. And then finally, use the tools that are available to you. Technology is your friend, I promise. And there are many, many tools out there that are available to you. You know, I think CLEs like this one helps to kind of emphasize that. You know, the Legal Fuel website is an incredible, I hope you don't mind me putting a little plug there for it, because it's an incredible resource of CLEs and articles that you can read about the type of tools that we use on a daily basis. So with that, that's all I have. I hope that you've at least taken one thing away, because I always say that, you know, a CLE, if I can learn just one thing, if there's one thing during that 1 hour presentation that I could take back to my office and use the next day, then I guess it was worth it. So I hope that we've done that today, giving you at least something to think about and something to take home. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Carlos. I mean, that was a great presentation. The only questions I have are related to obtaining a certificate of attendance for the course, which I'll be emailing out later on. Actually, we do have a question that just came in. Do you have a few software companies you could recommend for a small firm?
Yeah.
Talking about like EDiscovery Software.
Yeah. So is it Julius? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah. I mean, there, you know, you have yeah. I mean, iPro, Logical are good companies. Cloud9 are good companies for smaller firms. You know, if I think you have I think, oh, there it is. If you have my email, if you want to reach out to me, I can actually not only give you a list of the ones that I send my clients, but I can actually put you in touch with the people that I know at those companies that are used to working with smaller companies. Because you asked the best question, right? Before, or a great question. Before, these were just awesome tools that only the big firms could use. It's time for us, the smaller firms, to be able to get on a level playing field. And so if you reach out, I'm more than happy to send you a list, or at least the companies that I recommend that you give a call.
Yes, somebody asked if we could send that list to all the attendees. So if you, Carlos, if you don't mind putting that list together and putting it to me, I can email it to them and then also post it on the website along with the recording.
I would be happy to. I would be happy to. And I'm also wondering how come nobody's asked me about that client intake form.
Yeah.
Because you should want that.
You showed it too early and you gave them too much other stuff to worry about.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. I should.
But yes, we could. If you don't mind sharing that, we could post that as well.
I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. But again, you know, that's my email. That's my contact information. Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. I love doing this. And if there's no other questions, you know where to find me if I can be of any help.
Thank you, Carlos, again. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Again, the course number for today was 4993, and it was good for 1 hour of general CLE credit, including 1 hour of technology and ethics. And we thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.